We've been poisoned. The greatest drug dealers of all time have made us all addicted. I was telling doctors that my panic attacks were associated with certain foods I ate. And they all immediately thought I was crazy. You need an SSRI, here's a drug. And so I followed that and I kept getting worse and worse. I was like in a constant panic. Weird justifications in my head
Yeah.
of ways of trying to find a way to die. The brain fog was so debilitating. As I got better, I woke up without panic. I woke up without brain fog. It drives me every day now to tell as many people about this because, one, I believe now I know what happened to me. I know exactly the processes that happened to me, and I think I understand why veterans feel like they're trapped. I want to fight back against the corruption of processed foods. There's 135 people who commit suicide every single day. 22 of them are veterans. 5,075 have died on the line of duty since September 11, 2001, which means you're 4 times more likely to kill yourself than die by the hand of the enemy. I feel like I can help a lot of men, a lot of veterans. I've had enough of the lies. I can't believe I feel this good. So I'm going to tell the world about this.
Hello and welcome. Carrie here from Healing Humanity, the Power of a Proper Human Diet. And today I am thankful, grateful, blessed to have Chad on the channel, Combat Carnivore. Chad, how's it going?
Good. How about you? Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I'm doing wonderful. It's an honor to have you on the show. You had me interviewed me on your channel before. I'll have a link in the description to Chad's YouTube channel as well. But I really wanted to hear more about your story. It sounds like we have some common interests. You're also a veteran, and I love supporting veterans. So I wanted to learn more about that, as well as you're into Stoicism, which is something I'm very interested in as well. And you're also a carnivore, so we've got that in common too. So
Yeah.
maybe, Chad, if we could start out, could you tell me a little bit more about your life before finding a carnivore diet? Like what led you to it?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit different than a lot of the carnivore stories that you hear because a lot of the carnivore stories that you hear are people have been suffering like their whole life, right? And that's different from me because I had, I would say, a fantastic childhood in the regards, everyone deals with BS, everyone deals with trauma and things growing up, but I consider myself to have one of the best childhoods that you could have. I grew up in a cabin in the woods, very isolated, no TV, no internet. Um, and when I say no TV, like we didn't have cable. We had like a TV for like watching movies and stuff, but no like watching TV programs, no Disney, no nothing, no computers, just out in the woods by myself. So that was really cool. And so I did get brainwashed by a lot of things, but I felt great. I was happy with my athleticism. I was happy with like a lot of things going on in my life, like that I would say that many other people in life probably had to deal with that I didn't have to deal with. So I felt I was doing very good. And then all of a sudden my health took like a nosedive. And that's right when I joined the military. And there was an event that happened to me in the military. And you never know like what's going to trigger these things. But I think with a high deal of stress on top of the fact that I almost died in the military, uh, sent me down the spiral that I couldn't recover from, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I remember when I was 19, I bought a one-way ticket to Hawaii with no regard for anything, no anxiety, no worries whatsoever. And I arrived in Hawaii like, I don't even know what to do from here. You know what I mean? I figured it out. I found like a hostel. A couple days later, I had a bedroom in an awesome house to stay in, and then I had a job, I think, the next day. And so it's just like I was independent. I could do anything. I remember when I was like 17, I want to say, maybe 16, I worked salmon fishing in Alaska, like just very independent. Yeah, commercial salmon fisherman, as a teenager. And all of a sudden, after the military, after going off and joining the military and doing these things, it didn't hit me right away, but I started spiraling downhill. And I there's a lot of reasons why I think this happened, but I started developing these panic attacks, these phobias. this anxiety, this nonstop brain fog. This brain fog was almost like somebody was like blowing smoke into my brain. It was so weird. Like I couldn't see as well as I wanted to. It was like instantly my brain went from running on like all six cylinders to like barely puttering along. And I just couldn't figure it out. I was like, what is happening right now? And and this felt like it happened overnight, but it was, a little bit of a process. And I look back to what my diet was, and I start to see why I started to crumble downhill. But it got worse from there. I started developing chronic physical symptoms as well, just like digestive issues from A to Z, everything from, the stomach all the way down to the other end. Just every symptom that you could think of happening between there. And then 4 times a week, at least, 3 to 4 times at least, I would say, just to be conservative, I would get acute flu-like symptoms. Whereas like I had the flu, and it was perfectly coincidental with the time that I ate to when it came out the other end, whichever end it came from actually. And then I felt better. It was like it was very interesting, and I went to the doctors, and they would run labs and things, and for the most part, I looked pretty healthy, and they're like, "You look fine to me." And I went from specialist to specialist to specialist, and I kept getting worse and worse and worse. Um, my I remember when these things would happen, I would get random migraines, and I used to think like of other people, anxiety, headaches, things. These are things you just like power through. Just deal with it. I've had headaches, I've been anxious, but these were debilitating. Like I wanted to go to the hospital. And a couple times with those acute flu-like symptoms, something would trigger in my body where it couldn't stop throwing up. And so I would have to go to the doctor or the hospital, depending on what time it was, just to get someone to give me an IV and then give me some medicine to make it stop. If like every once in a while, like Dramamine would work to make me stop throwing up, but a lot of the time it didn't. And everyone's like, "Yeah, you're healthy. You're fine." Like I was like, "Obviously, I'm not healthy." And uh, then I start looking at my diet, and I started researching a lot about the military diet, MREs, uh, DFAC food, this kind of stuff. And all the stuff they're always like telling you to put starches in your body, put energy in your body, lots of carbs, lots of processed food, lots of GMO foods. You know what I mean? Lots of rice, corn, wheat, and not really a lot of good like red meat options. There's some depending on like what galley and things you would go to, but most of the time when you're going through these trainings and you're deployed or you're on mission, like it's just MREs, other processed meals that they can get to you. And then in addition to that, when I started going downhill, I started researching like what's a healthy diet for you. And this is what makes me some of the most it brings up some of the most emotions because and this is what I do on my channel is I Google in front of everyone, what is a healthy diet? And the AI and all the records of pages for the first 100 pages, I feel like, is like nonstop BS that is touted by the Seventh Day Adventists. Like nothing about red meat on there. It's always lean meat. Always get healthy protein from stuff like soy. Carbs are essential nutrients. You want to get this many carbs a day. And so, even for the people who are trying to make themselves better, they're forced almost to go down an avenue like a monopoly of information that leads them astray in the wrong direction. So even the ones who are like trying, like, hey, I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm following all the advice. I'm counting calories, everything in moderation, and it's just not working. It's because we've been poisoned. We've been like the greatest drug dealers of all time have made us all addicted. And when you try to get sober, there's they're the ones giving you the advice, and I truly think that the foods we eat are drugs. I think processed sugar is a drug by definition, by physical withdrawals, by mental what's the word? I'm like getting you mentally disoriented, like having mental effects on you. And so anyway, I'll get back to my story, but the thing is, I was telling doctors all the time that I started to realize that my panic attacks were associated with certain foods I ate, and they all immediately thought I was crazy,
Mm.
psychosomatic. you need an SSRI, here's a drug. Even doctors, I said like, hey, I really don't want to take a drug. I, I really think I can get through this naturally. They were all like, no, that's a horrible idea. Here's a drug. And so they put me on SSRIs. They put me on other things for my gut, made it worse. Told me right after I got out of my the gastrologist for like my scope, he said, suggest more fiber, right? In my diet. And so I followed that and I kept getting worse and worse. My anxiety was getting worse and worse. Uh, and this is something I didn't admit to anybody besides people I was very close with. And it's actually been very uncomfortable for me to talk about this next little bit right here because I'm embarrassed. I'm a man. I should be able to be independent like I was, and I think that's why this hit me so hard because I knew this wasn't normal for me. I knew like that something terribly had went wrong, and I had a mission to get my health back. And my panic attacks were so bad that one time I had one in my car while I was driving on I-25, the main roads, through the main highway through Colorado, and I almost got in a car accident. It was like I could see, but I couldn't register what was happening. I felt like I was going to faint, and I like ended up pulling over, probably cutting off like a bunch of cars, and I was like sitting there on the side of the road, thinking I was going to die, with 911 dialed on my phone, about to hit send, like about to call. And then eventually I like it subsided a little bit and I got home, but that happened a couple more times to the point where I couldn't drive anymore. I had little kids in my car and I couldn't drive myself because I thought I was going to get in an accident. And one weird thing about the way I almost died, I kept having these phobias, like my throat was going to close up, and then if I wasn't around anybody, I felt like my throat was going to close up and no one would be there to save me. So then I developed the phobia of being alone, and it like just kept spiraling and things kept getting worse. I was a grown ass man with my wife and some other family members driving me to work, driving me wherever I needed to go.
Hmm.
I couldn't do easy things like errands, like go to the store. That's literally was like my parents when I was staying with them for a bit, it was less than a minute. It was like you cross a couple streets and you're right there. I couldn't even go in there. I developed like a phobia of going in those grocery stores by myself. Um, and just having these weird like safe and secure places to be. And if I wasn't there, I was like in a constant panic. It was a huge burden on my wife.
Quick interruption. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in learning more about our documentary, Healing Humanity, The Power of a Proper Human Diet, or supporting it, please visit donate.healinghumanity.movie. Our goal is to reach millions of people that are hopeless right now and sharing the examples of real people over the course of 1 year that are undertaking a proper human diet to overcome obesity, type 2 diabetes, depression, anxiety, fertility issues. We couldn't do it without you. We thank you so much. We are also selling these shirts, Healing Humanity, The Power of a Proper Human Diet. Every penny we get from those goes towards the documentary. And last, we have memberships. If you click the little join button, it's best to do it on desktop. Under any one of my YouTube videos, you can join and become a member. We have hundreds of members right now. We do members only videos. We do members only behind the scenes. You can email me as a member and I'll answer you. And every penny from that goes to support the documentary. And the last thing is we have these Redmond's portable salt shakers. These things are awesome. You can get the best salt. You can take it with you. We sell these on the website along with our water bottles and cutting boards, and every penny from all of those goes 100% towards supporting the documentary. You can also sign up for our newsletter, which is completely free. All of these links are in the description below. Thank you so much for your support. Now back to today's video.
I was like in a constant panic. It was a huge burden on my wife, and she was going through a lot at the same time. It's a huge burden on my family. I felt like I wasn't a man and a father figure for my kids. Thank goodness I was able to push through at work, like because I wanted to quit my job because I was just having panic attacks there, but I would force myself through every single day. And my I was a little bit depressed, but not like the way you when I hear you guys talk about depression. I was more depressed in the fact that I was just stuck in a bad spot. So I wouldn't say it was like a chronic depression. Maybe, and I'll talk about this in a sec, but I was just so ready to be done with the pain, to be done with the pain of my mental symptoms, my physical symptoms. My spirit was just at an all-time low, and I wanted to die. And even though I didn't like, I never put like a gun in my mouth or anything like that. I thought about it a lot, but I came up with like creative ways to die where it was like, I'll just turn in front of this other car. And then I wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? And when I say I was driving, like for some reason I could drive if somebody else was in the car. I just couldn't drive by myself. So like I would be sitting there, I'll be like, you know what? I'm gonna drive right in front of this car to this tree. But then I'll have someone else in the car. And so I'm like, I can't do that. You know, like, you know what I mean? It's just weird, like weird justifications in my head
Oh, yeah.
of ways of trying to find a way to die to the point where it actually helped other things. So like I hated flying. Like I hate flying, but I have to do it a lot. But I was like, you know what? If the plane went down at least, I'll be done with this anxiety. I have good life insurance. And
Chad, just
yeah,
I
sorry.
totally with you on that. Oh my goodness. I used to do that nonstop for years. Think of creative ways like, oh, maybe there'll be a house fire or something. I can go try to like go out heroically or something, saving
Yeah.
someone. And my mind would do that nonstop over this ideation, just thinking of ways to just end the suffering. So uh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but it's
No, that's
crazy. Some of
yeah.
the stuff you're saying, we have a lot of stuff in common. So please continue.
Well, it's very I laughed at that because it's so similar to something I would think of. Like, how could I go out heroically?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, uh, if there was like I know stupid situations too, like when you're a kid kind of too, where it's like if a shooter came in here right now, I
Yeah.
would charge him. You know, like
Yep.
I would go down as a hero, things like that, and what do I got to lose? So that's kind of how I would say I was like depressed and but I wasn't like catatonic. Like I wanted to move and do things, but I had a bunch of dreams I sold my wife on, and like my anxiety, my panic and stuff was so debilitating, like they weren't coming to fruition. Um and that was depressing, just like shutting down like that. But I wouldn't say catatonic like the way that a lot of people are. But as I got healthy, I started to realize I was a lot more depressed than I realized.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like where I probably won't have diagnosed myself with depression, but after coming out of the fog, uh, yeah, I probably was a lot more depressed than I realized. I was probably just overwhelmed with panic and anxiety. But that's the other thing. The brain fog was so debilitating that I used to actually pray. I used to actually pray and beg. I said, just give me an hour of mental clarity. Just one day, 1 hour. That's all I'm asking for to remind myself that it used to be okay. I used to be normal. This is not what other humans experience. And I I'm in a special situation that can be reversed. And that's kind of like what kept me going. I was like, just 1 hour of mental clarity. And I never got that hour of mental clarity until I fasted. And that's what started getting me into, okay, I know this is diet for sure. All the doctors who were freaking gaslighting me for 10 years. So this went on for 10 years. So this started when I was in my early 20s and lasted until I was in my early 30s. And so that was like half my life at that point. So I had a life where things were okay and great. You know what I mean? When I say great in terms of like health and willing to work through my problems to like debilitated. And if you were to see me from the outside, and this is why I try to tote, it was like I had a decent house that I owned. I worked, I was like working cybersecurity, government contracting, making decent money. It was like the family with two boys, two girls, dog, white picket fence, reliability. And yeah, so I was not in a good space, very not in a good space. And that's what prompted me that as I got better to it drives me every day now to tell as many people about this because one, I believe now I know what happened to me. And the more carnivores that you speak to, the more relations you make, And the more you listen to smart people, like Bart Kay and Anthony Chafee, obviously Carrie, going through his story, Todd, there's so many people, but the more people that you listen to who actually understand what's going on physiologically, who can speak to it, and then you talk to all these other carnivores who have incredible stories, you start to make relationships. And so I started to understand, I think I know what happened to me. I think I know exactly the processes that happened to me, and I think I understand why veterans feel like they're trapped because I was there. And I think I know what caused it. And so, one, my channel is about getting to as many veterans and people who are in negative mental states. You know what I mean? And obviously, as a byproduct, you're gonna. I think most of the carnivore community right now is about weight loss. You know what I mean? Maybe autoimmune disorders, diabetes, but mental health, I think, is not something nearly talked about as enough as it should be. And even though when you listen to like Michaela Peterson, yourself, Jordan Peterson, they really focus on the fact about how it helped them mentally, but still people focused on the weight they lost as like a public thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
it's a frustrating thing for me too. So many
yeah,
people just, oh, how am I going to lose weight? Or they call it a diet. I'm like, this is so much more than weight loss. And it's
yeah.
unfortunately
It's
that's the entry point for so many people.
I feel like it's mental weight loss. Like the
Yeah,
weight on your brain just like lifted, like your brain can actually go and function and establishing. That's why I've become to really tote like the body is truly the temple. You know what I mean? And it's a weird thing because like we are the powerhouse. We are the decision makers of what we feed all these servients in our body that we call cells. And they have no choice but to just deal with the BS that we give it or the power that we give it. And therefore it can only treat you so well in return. And so I've really come to be like the mind, the body, and the soul, which I believe live harmoniously, and they can't be without one another. If it will continuously be sunken down by the ball and chain if you are treating it as such. If you have the respect that you have for yourself will become a direct representation of the respect that you treat your body, and then your body can only treat you with so much respect in return. I know that seemed a little esoteric, but to make it a little bit more not esoteric is like um what the way that you treat your body in terms of the what garbage or lack of garbage you put into it will end up being the resources that your tools and your organisms inside your body, being like mitochondria and cells, that's all that they can work with in order to treat you well, in order to build things for you. If you had a working crew on your house and you only gave them the cheapest food and the cheapest, or like that starved them pretty much, and then gave them the cheapest tools, the cheapest resources to rebuild your house, and then you're like expecting your house to be or immaculate, immaculate. There we go. And like, why would you expect that? You've given them all the garbage resources. Of course, your house is going to come out garbage, but they're doing the best that they can with what you're giving it. And so, so one, and I'll digress here in a moment, but one, the reason why I am so driven for this channel and why I feel like I need to speak out is to push against things like the vegan movement, because that I felt made things way worse. And it sucks that that's the first thing that when you type in what is a healthy diet, red meat's evil, more plants, more fiber, all the garbage, all the things are exactly wrong. You know what I mean? Um, so that's frustrating. I want to fight back against that. I want to fight back against the corruption of processed foods. I want to maybe make a difference in what the military feeds their soldiers, you know, and I want to reach as many people who are suffering mentally, especially men. Uh, you know, there there's 135 people who commit suicide every single day. 22 of them are veterans, and 68 over 68% of those people committing suicide are white males, and males are 4 times more likely to kill themselves than women. I'm not a woman. I don't know what it's like to deal with the ups and downs. My wife dealt with a lot, and I could see I could only be like a support for her until we found the right answers. But I can speak to men. I know exactly what I went through. I know exactly what messages they're receiving. And I feel like I can help a lot of men, a lot of veterans, and I can pinpoint why this is happening to veterans. So my channel is about reaching out to them, about researching in front of everybody why you might go down the wrong rabbit hole, and then why you have to start to use critical thinking. And I talk about this a lot. If you're always waiting for the research, you're going to be waiting forever.
Right.
If you're waiting for the data to tell you how to live in association with your ancestors, you're going to be waiting forever because there's not going to be money into it. All the people who provide money are the Seventh Day Adventists, Coke companies, and then very particular government processes. You know what I mean? And it
Right.
loses everybody money. Fasting loses everybody money. Eating healthy loses almost everybody money, besides like the red meat. So everyone's kind of like, we haven't had data about this and we don't know data about this. We know that there's phytonutrients in plants because the data shows it. Like, you're reading data that is compared to a processed American diet. That's why it looks better. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
if you're waiting for the data to show, we're going to be waiting forever to show an animal-based diet versus a carnivore diet. Who's going to do that study? Because
Right.
only people who are profit are red meat, basically.
Right. Or waiting. It seems like men in particular don't want to ask for help. So they'll wait for that reason. And maybe more so veterans or servicemen or servicewomen. The thing I always try to encourage people with is most of what we're talking about here, you don't have to go get permission from your doctor in order to do this. It would be great, but it's you're putting food in your mouth every single day. We're suggesting you put better food in your mouth. I get so many people that say that to me, like, "Well, I can't do it. My doctor's not on board, or I need someone to kind of like guide me through it." And it's like we're not even selling you anything here. It's just eat proper human food sort of thing. You don't really need permission.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is like the like for any meat products, like what if there's like a meat bar or a carnivore bar and you're just trying to help people? Like the only way I think you could make money is like an affiliate with like a carnivore bar or a meat bar. And then even then you're talking about like nickels on the dollar. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? That you're trying to make money from. Or we do these communities, and we'll talk about this hopefully in a bit, but like you do a community so it's like you can get people together and that way you have more resources in order to help people, but you're still talking about like what, $30 a month? I don't know, like whatever that might be.
exactly. Well, that's the thing that convinced me to do carnivore ultimately was what you were just talking about. Everything in this world is making us sicker so that other people can make money.
Right.
What we're suggesting here is stop that and just do this. And it's not like we're not selling you anything in that you could go watch 1,000 Dr. Berry videos right now. And he doesn't say, but wait, give me $1,000 and I'll tell you the magic pill. No, you just go eat meat. We just told you, you just go eat meat. You got to understand, you got to do the research first. You got to be comfortable with it. But that was one of the things that ultimately convinced me to do carnivore was I'm like, well, this guy's not even selling anything. He's just telling me to eat
Right.
meat and free information right here.
Dude, all right, so I have this good friend and his wife has Hashimoto's, and he was about to give this crook who like she came across his page, but like $10,000. I don't remember how much, but it's a ridiculous amount of money for like a magical potion, a magic elixir, a magic supplement. Here's the medicine that's going to change your genetic expression in order for you to be healthy again. And she was willing to spend $10,000 or more or whatever it was, I can't remember exactly, thousands of dollars in order for that magic elixir, and it's not going to work, you
Right.
know. And what we're saying is, we like you don't need to buy anything to go carnivore besides switching your diet. And she's more resistant to that. She's like, no, I can't do that. She was willing. The answer for her was worth $10,000. It's not worth switching the diet. That's how weird this is. And so, like you're saying, the information's free. You don't need me. You don't need like I don't have a magic answer. I don't have a supplement. You don't need to go through me or anybody else to get this information. You can get it in terms of monetarily, you can just get this for free. You can watch everything you need for free.
Right.
Anything that's going to make money is just the fact that we know you're going to eat more meat. So here's a bar. You know what I mean? If
Yep.
you're struggling with this, maybe we can coach you, but there's no barrier to entry for
Right.
this.
Well, Chad, you said she was willing to pay 10 grand because she wants like a quick fix or something like that.
Yeah.
I've often thought about this. What do you think? What would you pay knowing what you know now that this is done for you? if you could have had this at your darkest moment when you were completely hopeless with panic attacks and couldn't drive your car, like I said in my 30-day video, I'm like, if I had a lottery ticket for $1 billion, I'd rip it up. Like
Yeah,
I wasn't living before this.
exactly. Like I would have been in debt for the rest of my life. And we can talk about that when we go into Stoicism too, about a lot of things that saved me, a lot of mental processes
Right.
that
Well,
saved me where yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead though. So you started talking. Can you tell a little bit more? You started fasting, and that started fixing things for you a little bit. How did you ultimately get into carnivore, changing your diet?
Yeah, well, you know, and to uh prelude this, whatever, prelude this, like what's it called? What's the word I'm looking for?
Preface?
To preface this, thank you, thanks you so much. To preface this, um, I had spent already thousands of dollars. I remember I went to this chiropractor who had like this entire specialty in diets to fix things that I was dealing with. It was funny, it was high fiber, right? Vitamin B supplements and stuff, thousands of dollars. And he was specialized in helping people with anxiety. Like I got worse. You know what I mean? So I spent thousands of dollars on this plan, meeting him all the time. So anyway, I already had spent thousands of dollars I didn't have at the time because I was so desperate. And I would have ripped up like if someone was like, you could either win the lottery or be healthy again, I would have been healthy again in a
Yeah.
heartbeat. But so I'm sitting here talking to every single doctor. I'm like, I'm telling you, like when I eat these specific foods, I will have a panic attack. And when I don't eat them, you know what I mean? Like I don't have a panic attack. And like other symptoms might happen. And like each one of these foods causes a different symptom. I'm like, because I'm at the time I was going through for my degree in mathematics and physics. And so I was like trying to approach this very like a scientific method. Like I lowered all the foods I was eating. Unfortunately, it was like white rice and broccoli and chicken. You know what I mean? Like the not very good. But as I added things back, you know what I mean? At least I was off processed foods. And as I added things back, I started to figure out what's bothering me. And like he's crazy, pretty much. And so I knew that this food was having a relationship. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of hope that it was dietary and I could figure it out, right? And I ended up seeing a video finally, a video that was Paul Saladino getting his ass chewed on some doctor's show where a bunch of women were just yelling at him for
I've seen
suggesting
that
eating
one.
red meat.
Yeah.
And then and as I've matured in the understanding of my nutritional processes and understanding, I understand that, Paul Saladino and I disagree on a lot, but the fact that there was a somebody who was practicing medicine, as he said, who was a psychologist, and who was saying there's a relationship between food and mental health was like a saving grace, like a validation, a vindication to be like, yes, what does this guy have to say? And he's the one who got me on the idea of red meat is good. This is what our ancestors ate. Fruit is good because it's what we eat naturally, whole foods, and no vegetables, screw vegetables. And I was like, what? And it started to make sense. All right. All the things that, feel wrong all of a sudden start feeling right. And so I did it and I started to feel a lot better. Like my panic attacks started lessening, like the intensity of them. I started being able to do a little bit more. I was 100% there. But one of the crazy things is I couldn't work out anymore because I would get overheated and start panicking. Like I couldn't like release heat. It was weird. And I was an athlete, right? I was doing jujitsu, and it's like I went from being a competitive jujitsu athlete for not competing and training hard for like 4 years, uh, which was devastating because I grew up wrestling and doing sports and martial arts, and um, to not have like an athletic outlet or even be able to work out hard was very difficult for me. So like working out again was like, whoa, this is yes. And then I kind of heard him do an interview kind of like back and forth about fasting. And he kind of disagreed with fasting, but the other guy was making sense about fasting. So I was like, oh, what's this fasting thing? You could just not eat. And then I looked into how much digestive distress, or I guess like how much of a tax your body takes when you digest food. especially shitty food. And um, th- that when I hit my first hour, so like I was on a 3-day fast, and I think about the second day, I woke up like in a good mood. I woke up like without panic. I woke up without brain fog. I was 2 days without eating, and I was doing jujitsu extremely well. You know, like I was training hard. Everything felt great. I even got compliments. I was even getting compliments about how well I was training that day. And I was like, I haven't eaten in 2 days. And they're like, what? And this is, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, none of this was really heard of. There's people doing it now that I'm in the research aspect of it, but like no one I knew telling them to starve for a while voluntarily, that's not in the book. You can't Google that back
Right.
11 years ago. And so that really got me into learning more about fasting. And so I started doing 3-day fasts. I would do 2 days without water, and then I would do 2 days after that with water. I maybe add some bone broth or stuff like that. And that really, I think, accelerated my health. And then I saw his interview with Anthony Chafee. And then Anthony Chafee took it to a whole new level. Plants are like evil, like evil. Plants are trying to kill you. And I was like, what in the heck? And then I started learning about the monsterization of fruits. I actually steal your line a lot. It's Frankenfood. Like, like these are not natural. You're not meant to have sugar. And then I started to dive deep into the aspect of like what insulin actually does in your body, you know? And thanks to Anthony Chafee getting me on that path. So then I went full carnivore, and I started listening to Bart K, and Bart K's got like 3 PhDs in this industry, and so that helped out a lot. And then I just started to get this holistic understanding of what nutrition actually is and how we've been lied to. And then I had my first competition as a carnivore, as a black belt in a cage. I felt so good. I decided to do it blindfolded, and I submitted. And this other guy I had fought before 3 times, extremely talented black belt. I submitted him in like I don't know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes with an arm bar. It felt easy,
Hmm.
like, and I felt like a monster, and I felt calm at the same time. And I'm an active, avid competitor, and I always hated competing. I hated it because I would just like shut down. I wouldn't feel very well. But this, as 100% carnivore, no carbs, was the best I've ever felt competing, the best I ever felt training. I even did it blindfolded. So I submitted a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in a cage in front of an audience, you know, um, in a couple minutes. Like, so I went from I remember 1 week I didn't get it out of bed basically because I was just so panicky. I didn't want to move, felt horrible, all the way to traveling around the world. I ended up getting my black belt in Rio de Janeiro from the Brazilians, and learning Portuguese, flying by myself from country to country, speaking Portuguese in one, Spanish in the other, getting back and speaking English. And I was like, wow, I can do that. I am this strong. And this, especially this competition that happened a couple months ago, I want to say, just was like, I've had enough. I've had enough of the lies. I can't believe I feel this good. So I'm going to tell the world about this. And I know I live in Colorado Springs. It's a huge military town. And so I know a ton of vets who are struggling, digestive issues, anxiety, and they go hand in hand, PTSD, which is what I had, and a slew of chronic illnesses, and they feel like they're broken. And it's my goal in life to tell them that they're not broken, to tell them why they feel like they're in a spiral, because even when they try to Google how to get better, they're fed nothing but lies. If you're feeling, they're like, there's resources for you. If you're a veteran, there's resources for you. All right, these are the resources. I finally get an appointment with a VA, you know, and then this is what they tell you. You're loved. The world is better with you in it. Here's a drug. Go ahead and mess around with the physiological processes of your brain with androgynous chemicals. Here you go. this is going to help you. And that's all they're allowed to do. And as a matter of fact, if they can lose their license if they don't prescribe the drug, and they can lose their license if they prescribe too much of a drug. And the SSRIs, and you can talk about this a little bit, the statistics I just looked up, some of them rate them as low as a 45% effective rate. And what's even weirder is that depending on what studies that you look at, as low as 30% of the people who take it go into remission. So they are literally prescribing a drug that puts less than a third of the people who go on it in remission. And they have to put labels on it now because plenty of studies have shown that it makes people worse and act on suicidal tendencies. And a lot of people don't know that the pharmaceutical, everyone says big pharma, they don't realize that they are the number one lobbying group in the United States. If I
Mm,
remember the number correctly, it's around here, but it's about 1,800 employees are lobbyists for pharmaceutical companies. 1,800. That's bigger than most companies by itself, having 1,800 employees. But 1,800 of pharma are lobbying and donating and making the laws in this country. And they are in bed with the food companies. And a lot of people don't realize how corrupt the insurance companies are, which
right,
we pay insurance on top of the fact that they get government subsidized to
right.
be able to charge a ton of money for these drugs that we can't afford. So we're reliant on the drug companies or the insurance companies. And then the food companies know exactly what they're doing. It's like they're all in bed.
The
And
big
these are some
circle.
like, and they're all some of the biggest lobbyists, like insurance companies, food companies, and the pharmaceutical being the number one by far.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I always
go
show
ahead.
people most of these were the SSRIs that did nothing for me. And you said this earlier, Chad. I just want to repeat this. I thought I was broken. There's a something wrong with my brain that causes
Mhm.
me to have this depression. And that's the biggest mistake. And you said it earlier. And I love that you said it because everyone listening, you're not broken. It's just the foods you're eating. For me, it was 100% nutrition. So they give you these pills that have such a low effective rate, like you just mentioned, but it's not treating the root cause of the problem. So what does that even mean? It's like a temporary band-aid. And when you go to the doctor and they're like, well, we don't know. We don't know what's causing this or what's doing it, but here's a pill. Well, how are you prescribing me a pill if you don't know what's causing it in the first place? It drives me absolutely insane, but you're not treating the root cause of the problem. So it just prolongs the problem. And you used the word earlier, you're led astray. You go down that road. I went down that road for 10 to 15 years. Take
Mhm.
one medication. Oh, that didn't work. There's something wrong with me. I got to take this one. I got to take this one. I hate the fact that it puts it on the individual. Like you're just a broken human with something wrong with you. And that's not the case. That's not the root cause of the issue.
Yeah, they gaslight you and they tell you multiple things like, well, genetics, like, do you have other family members and this, that? And that just makes me so upset because they gaslight the shit at you. And
Yeah.
um, the other thing is, not only does it not work, so oh, veterans, veterans since 2001 to 2021 is when the study was done. So it's way more than this now. Had over 30,000 members who had committed suicide. 5,075, if I remember that number correctly, have died on the line of duty since September 11th, 2001, which means you're 4 times more likely to kill yourself than die by the hand of the enemy. So this is very interesting. Not only does it not work a lot of the time, it can actually make you worse.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you become dependent on it. I call it addiction. They say you can't be addiction because you won't change your lifestyle in order to get it. So, for example, like cocaine, you might like miss work and do something desperate to get money to go do to cocaine. So that's like the definition for addiction, apparently. Like there's very semantics are important, so fair enough, right? But regardless, you develop very horrible withdrawal symptoms. Uh, so you become dependent on it. So they're feeding you a drug that changes your brain chemistry, makes you physically and mentally dependent on it. It doesn't even work. So now you're like this returning customer. And this is the best you've come up with for our veterans after the past 20 plus years. This is still the intervention process. This is all you came up with all the money that we're spending on VA. This is the best you could do. You are a joke. You are a joke. Your industry is a joke. And that's what makes me, that's why I get up every day in the morning to record this content. To be like, no, that's BS. and you have a horrible intervention method, if that's the best that you could do, I'm calling you a joke. Send them my way. Every vet that you think is done for, how about just send them my way? What do you got to lose? I'm just going to coach them a little bit about eating a different diet, right? What you're doing right now hasn't made them better. Their gut's still messed up. What have they got to lose? If they're going to commit suicide, they're going to do it anyway. Cardiovascular disease happening a couple years down the road. Let's go. Let's throw the dice. You know
right?
what I mean?
Well,
Let's wage the odds.
the other thing too is that a lot of people don't talk about, once you're on that medication, besides all the horrible things you just mentioned, a lot of people end up gaining a ton of weight. And then they have all of these other side effects. And then you end
Hmm.
up going on more pills for the side effects. That's where you end up with 15 or 20 pills like this, because you just get into this cascade. Now this is wrong and now this is wrong, but it's all root cause because you're taking that. And if I was already getting fatter and unhealthier on the standard American diet, which was the root cause of the problem in the first place. But then you start taking those pills, you just don't care anymore. You're like, I'm going to eat more, I'm going to eat more. And a lot of people that are on SSRIs end up gaining weight from the SSRIs, which then lead to
Hmm.
more downstream problems.
Yeah, and then they end up losing libido. That
Yeah,
causes depression. That causes marital strain. That causes, like, there's a slew of things, like you said. But what's even worse is that if I were to suggest to a veteran now who's already addicted to the drug, oh, sorry, dependent on the drug, to ask them to change, they're going to have to go through their doctor. Their doctor's going to say probably not. Then it's going to be a withdrawal symptom, and so they're going to have to go through pain in order to get off of that. And so the doctor's going to let them know of all that. And now there's a like a fear mongering because you're going to be terrified already with anxiety. You know what I mean? So you already have anxiety to be like, okay, now I'm going to change my chemical physiology one more time. I'm going to go through all these withdrawal symptoms. I'm going to go have to go through hell. I'm already in hell and you want me to go through worse hell for an opportunity on the other side that I'm not even sure about, that everyone talks shit about, like the carnivore diet, everyone talks smack about that all the time.
right,
This is what we're up against.
right,
And this process saved my life, but you know how long it took me and how much courage it took me to do that, to get off the SSRIs, to be like, I just have to deal with the withdrawal. Like, that's terrifying when you already have anxiety because you don't have confidence in yourself to do anything. It's so wow, that was a lot of talking for me. So thank you so much for giving me the space to talk about this. I get passionate, I get emotional, but that's my story basically. That's why I want to get this message out. I don't care. I used to have a semi-successful like YouTube channel. My Instagram was, some popularity. You know how you could be popular within your own industry, but no one else in the world knows who you are. I had
right.
some decent popularity there, but it though I love jujitsu and as we'll talk about, I believe we can save the world, especially combat veterans and especially men, with steak strangles and stoicism, right? With something that's going to be satisfies your body completely, mind, body, and soul. What you put in your body, how you treat your body, how you simulate combat to get to the other side, and then how you process the events that happen to you with stoicism. And I think that's the most current, I think that is the best intervention method that you could possibly have for a veteran or a man who's distraught and who's disgruntled. I think it happens near immediately. And what's weird, it's like, well, you have to wait 3 weeks, you have to wait 4 weeks or whatever. I'm like, that was the SSRI. That was a protocol for the SSRI anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? Is like it might take months for it to kick in, and we're gonna have to raise your dose if we're not seeing anything. By the
Yeah.
time we realize it doesn't work, now you're addicted, or sorry, dependent. So yeah, so anyway, that's who I am. That's why I have this channel. I know I'm not big right now, but I've revamped, I've deleted most everything on my social media platforms to become the combat carnivore, to get this message to as many people as possible, to fight back against the system, to fight back against the vegans, the Seventh Day Adventists, to fight back as much as I can to at least be, if I reach just a few voices, that's a few lives saved. 22 veterans a day are committing suicide. And maybe one conversation with me, this nobody, you know what I mean, might save their life. Who
Yeah.
knows? And I want to fight that fight. I want to gamble that gamble. So that's who I am. I'm the combat carnivore. My fight name in jiu-jitsu is Chad the Dad, and this is I feel like my purpose in life now, and I feel like I went through hell to truly discover how much food can affect you, to in order to bring some light and to be able to help other people and to give my kids as well. I have 4 kids, um, to give them the most healthy life possible. I believe that was my sacrifice and my earning to what I deserve to give to other people in the world. That
That's right.
was my baptism kind of.
Right. I'm so happy you're doing it. It's an honor to have you on here. I really believe the only way many people are going to change is if they're inspired by somebody else. And I think you can be an inspiration to other servicemen, other men that are out there for sure. I had another gentleman on my channel before. His name is Arn. And I think he just turned 80, and he was a veteran, and he had horrible depression, and he found carnivore. Could you imagine this? He went, I can't imagine the suffering for decades and decades and decades into his 70s until he found proper human diet. And he looked in the camera and he was like, Carrie, for the first time, and as long as I can remember, I don't have any dark episodes. That depression is completely gone. And it's just incredible. Long
Can
story
I?
short, I think I mentioned these before, Chad, but I just want to say it one more time. We're doing this documentary, Healing Humanity, about people returning to a proper human diet. And after talking to Arn and talking to Chad and talking to Carnivore Soldier Larry's got a great YouTube channel. He's trying to help out veterans as well. We're doing a documentary movie, but then we're doing a series afterwards. I want to have probably a couple, but at least one to start a whole episode dedicated 100% to veterans, servicemen and women, and proper human diet and what it can do. For people that are out there and they're like, this is crazy, I don't believe any of this, I always recommend reading Dr. Georgia Eid. She's got a great book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, that gets into the
Hmm.
actual science behind a lot of this. But know that like Chad isn't just a weirdo. There's a lot of other individuals out there that have done exactly what Chad's done. For me, it was all depression and anxiety, but I have heard this over and over again. I've interviewed hundreds of carnivores between the documentary and my YouTube channel. And like you said earlier, Chad, a lot of people, oh, I just want to lose some weight, which drives me nuts. Or they have type 2 diabetes, they have some other issue. But every one of them, every single one of them afterwards, they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize I had anxiety. I didn't realize how bad the brain fog was before. I didn't realize I even had depression and stuff like that before. Every single person I've talked to overcomes something like that. So uh, I'm so glad that you're doing it. You're trying to get the word out. And I'm happy to help elevate your voice any way that I can. Um, One of the questions I want to talk a little bit more about. Can you talk a little bit? Why are you also passionate about Stoicism, and how has that helped your
Yeah.
journey?
Um, but yeah, we'll dive into that like a lot. I also want to say that if I could get into contact with anybody who's trying to help veterans with the same movement, I don't think we should be running different fronts. I think we should all get onto one page, or like if there's going to be an online group helping people, we should all be teaming up to make that happen. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
figure out like what's the best way to do that. So
I'd love to connect you with those two that I know of
yeah,
right now. I don't know if you've talked to him. Carnivore Soldier Larry, he's down in Texas. He's incredible. And then Arn isn't doing YouTube, but he actually wrote a book all
yeah,
about PTSD and depression. And he volunteers at an organization, I think it's for veterans. And that's all he's dedicating it, just like you. He's dedicating his whole life. He's like, this is my purpose in life now, is to help other people. So it's kind of cool because there's people doing it from different forms of media. This guy's just
yeah.
doing a book, you're doing YouTube kind of thing. So I'll definitely, after this call, I'll hook you up and connect you with those guys.
That would be fantastic. Yeah.
And I would
And
love to have your story as well in the Healing Humanity series that we're going to be working on. So I'll follow up with you on that too.
it would be an honor. And uh, when this is what motivated me as well is as I've watched your story, I've people putting their stories out there, like you said, might connect with someone in such a weird way that it finally prompts them to make that next step. And I would have never done that until I heard people's stories and to connect with them. I've actually sent your story a lot to a lot of my friends who are ill in a lot of similar ways, and it's motivated them to start this. But the other thing why I want to say that it's very interesting that this is chronic is veterans from World War I and World War II, their PTSD, suicide, mental health problems had spiked right after the war. And that's what you would expect. You know what I mean? War, depression, things like that. And then all of a sudden they got better. Like the trend of their mental health went up, their suicide rates went down, mental clarity, overall success of these veterans balanced very well for them. I shouldn't say very well, considerably. Let's say in contrast, they did well as time went on, which is what you would expect. And as we get into PTSD and the hippocampus and that relationship to depression, so on and so forth. However, what we see with certain Vietnam vets, and especially um, like Iraqi freedom veterans or anyone post 9/11, or even people from like Desert Storm, their trends go completely different. They get worse over time. As a matter of fact, in one of the studies, I believe it was 2022, I can't remember what year, but over 8,000 vets had committed suicide that year, and over 5,000 of them were 50 and older. So it's like that shows me it's a chronic illness. That shows me like they get worse over time, and it's because like their BDNF, their processes, their brain, like the what's it called, the insulin resistance in the brain, it gets worse over time.
Right.
They're not being refed. Our bodies, our physical mechanism is designed to deal with traumas. It's designed to deal with atrocities. It's designed to deal with stress, and it gets over it. I watch animals like on the Discovery Channel and stuff. It's like they have like a life-threatening attack, and then like a minute later they're just grazing, like it never
Right.
happened. You know what I mean? But they learn, like, but they it's not like they go to speak to a therapist or I know humans are more complex than this, but humans are the most badass creature on the planet.
Today's video is brought to you by ButcherBox. There is a link in the description below. They have awesome free offers. Their meat is grass-fed, grass-finished, and the reason we promote it, I'd prefer you go get meat from your local independent farmer, but a lot of people can't do that. You can go on ButcherBox's website, you can order it. They have lots of promos like get free meat for 1 year. Right now they got free ribeyes for a year, which is my favorite cut of steak. The offers change from time to time, but there's a link in the description below. If you use our link, you can get those free steaks for a year. They'll deliver them to your house.
We were the alpha predators. We ran this shit. We ran the whole world.
Right.
We're not these weak little things that we think ourselves out to be, where it's like my dad didn't look at me enough growing up and now I can't function as an adult. Like, no, that's not us.
Right.
We are designed to adapt and overcome some awesome, incredible things. And it's weird to see that our ancestors, a daily life of just getting food for them would be a freaking trauma for our modern human. They wouldn't be able to survive it. And if they did, they would talk about it all the time, and they would need a Starbucks latte and whatever every single morning to get through it with a therapist. So I know I'm getting off in the weeds, but I'm just saying that humans are awesome, and we're
Right.
not, whatever we are now is is not what we're designed to be. And so we you're not broken, and as you get older and you poison yourself more with this food, and your brain becomes more insulin resistant, there's a reason why people like that get worse over time. And it you can't blame it on anything else, in my opinion, but the system that they're in, because the old system, when we didn't have as much processed foods before tobacco companies took over processed food companies, you saw the trend go completely opposite. So this to me is environmental, because the
Right.
environment has changed and the trends have changed. Now, Stoicism, what got me into Stoicism? And that's a very important question. I found religion, and this is, I should say this. I grew up pretty religious, and then certain events happened to me in my life to make me challenge religion. And rather than challenge religion, I started embracing other religions, because as I grew up in a cabin in the woods, I didn't even realize there was other religions. And so I started researching other religions, and I would even practice some other religions, because to me it was like, how could I go around and tell everybody that Christianity was like the best religion, hands down, when it's the only one I ever experienced? It's the only one I ever read up about. The only thing I've heard about other religions are like little, like, cherry pick things, you know what I mean? That when I speak to Muslims or Hindus and stuff, that's like not even remotely true. And you know what I mean? And so I got into that. And then as I got more into theology and just understanding the history of theology, I got into philosophy. And I got very heavy into philosophy. And one of those philosophies that kept sticking with me was Stoicism. And you know, I even studied philosophy in school for a little bit, as like electives and whatnot. But I really enjoyed it, and so I started doing research on my own. And then my feed, like social media feed, kind of kept getting filled with Stoicism. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna kind of like religion, in the sense that I'm gonna practice it. I'm gonna like become a practicing Stoic. and see what it's all about. And I'm going to become a practicing nihilist. I'm going to become a practicing what, what I mean? Just to see what these philosophies are about. And it's cool. It's because like it's not required. You're not required to believe in anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's not dogmatic. It's not a belief requirement, and you don't outcast anybody who's not doing it. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of leniency. Like one quote is be lenient with yourself and strict with or sorry, be lenient with others and strict with yourself. Like remember you were that person not too long ago. You know what I mean? It's actually holds like if that person's an asshole to me, just remember like they're going through a life. If you probably went through the same thing they went through, you might be an asshole too that to that day. And so it's actually very lenient with others. So it's actually the opposite of like dogmatic. It's like we can't expect anybody to be like we are because they haven't lived our life. And so I got into that. I did like some stoic challenges, and it was one of the best I ever did. And it in some of my darkest times, it got me out of those processes of wanting to die and surviving that day.
Mm,
And so when I was like going down a dark spiral, it's like I could start looking into stoicism just to get me through picking up that gun, or you know what I mean? And
you're right.
so then I just became more in depth into stoicism and my daily practices as a lifestyle. I realized it was resonating with me more than tons of philosophy sticks with me, but uh, Stoicism is more of a practical life philosophy, and it's very different than a lot of other philosophies. Taoism's kind of like this as well, where it demands of you your actions rather than just like esoteric thought. And I love trying to answer questions that don't have answers. It's impossible to have the answers. And that does good things for your thought processes. However, Stoicism demands of your actions.
Mm,
Doesn't matter what's going on inside your head. What matters is how did you treat that person? Did you respect yourself enough to give yourself the response that you would respect of somebody that you respected? Like it's weird. It's start like somebody's always watching. Yeah, it's you. You're always watching. When you think your boss is watching, you work harder. That shows me that you respect your boss more than you.
mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, start demanding from yourself. And so that kind of got me into a very good mental place and probably what kept me out of like a chronic depression, in my opinion. Uh,
There's something I've learned with, I'm just scratching the surface on Stoicism. I need to learn a lot more. But one of the things I found really interesting was kind of the control part of it. Like nobody can make me mad. I'm
mm,
choosing to allow them to make me mad. That was one of the things that really stuck out for stoicism for me. It's like, wow, I really am in total control. Like if I ended up in some horrible condition where I'm thrown in a dungeon or something, I can choose. I have the ability to choose in my mind how I'm going to react, and maybe it's a blessing that I'm still alive instead of dead. It's like all how you look at it. It's kind of a control thing, which is sort of interesting with carnivore or proper human diet, because I feel like I'm in a lot more control that way because I don't have these addictions anymore that are controlling me, sugar and food and
mhm.
things like that.
It's all about being dependent or independent, rather. And you're 100% right on that to the point where a lot of the narrative, God, the narrative of modern culture right now is so embarrassing in a lot of ways. But it's like self love. You're right, everybody else is wrong. It's just weird, weird stuff, in my opinion. And I mean, I guess that a lot of people buy into it because it's a nice message to buy into. However, Stoics are the opposite. They're like, expect more from yourself, right? Don't like get down on yourself, but expect more from yourself. Uh, let's go ahead and visualize. You know how people are like positive visualization. The Stoics say, no, visualize all the worst things that can happen to you.
Right.
It's like, what are you anxious about? Okay, what about those things actually makes you anxious? Okay, what's the actual worst case scenario in each one of those things? Oh, so you're going to be okay, basically.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so the negative visualization goes through every process of what could go wrong and then realize at the end, oh, I will be okay. And that's kind of a relief. If the worst thing that happens is on this plane, I could crash. I think of all the worst things. I was like, I'm dead. I can't change anything about that. But if I get through this, all the good things will happen. And then all of a sudden it makes you more I guess appreciative of all the good things, because one of the big quotes is you suffer in imagination more than in reality.
Oh, I
And
love that one.
yeah, and so we just sit and just suffer, but and we avoid it, kind of like it's like all the things that could go wrong, we avoid it and we allow it to torture us. But if you go head on, like, what is that? I'm going to tackle. And as a matter of fact, they have another quote that's like the obstacle is the way, and they have a lot of sailing and like wrestling quotes, but smooth seas don't make good sailors. Go become a good sailor. Go into the storm. Whatever you're most worried about, that becomes your task.
Right.
Bury yourself in that. And then there's like in jujitsu, there's less things out there that could hurt you now because you have put yourself in all the bad scenarios and none of those things could hurt you. Whatever situation you put me in life, I'm going to be okay because I mentally prepare, I spiritually prepare for that. And to the point where it's like in the why I say jujitsu is like we have become so talented in being ready for a physical altercation. We don't want one to happen, but it's like, bitch, try. I wish you would. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so what other people fear most, you're almost looking forward to. Doomsday preppers. They're like, yo, I'm so prepared and you guys are so unprepared. I wish it would happen because I would be king. Yeah.
Right.
Um, things like that. So I and the thing I wanted to talk about earlier and why I think it will save a lot of people, stoicism, who are in a dark spot, is to realize that you're not victims, right? You are not victims of the things that have happened to you, and you're not victims of what's going to happen. Everyone's worried about, like my friend calls it, like a PTSD flare up, like a PTSD moment, seeing red or whatever. It's just being able to not function. You avoid these things and you're scared whatever happens to you out there is you're not going to be able to control it. That puts you back in control. It's weird because it makes you responsible for your actions and how you react. And once you start taking responsibility for that, you start respecting yourself more. And one thing I did when I was in a very bad spot is I put myself on my deathbed every single day. And I started talking to death and I started making death my best friend. Now I have this huge tattoo on my back of death, but death's got my back. I think death wants to become our best friend. Death will make your life better. It will bring a lot of value to life. And a lot of people avoid death. And we start to realize at the root cause of all of our anxiety is death. Anxiety is just this chemical that lets you know that death might be around the corner. So let's go ahead and become very intimate, very close with death. And you become best friends with death. All of a sudden, life gets better. You look at your kids differently. You look at your job every single day and you say, what am I doing? You look at the food that you're putting in your body and why would I live 1 ounce of my life in the state? Why would I accept that from myself? And you realize life is a lot. So when you're on your deathbed, it's like, was this day worth it? And the reason why I say that, I imagine myself like, years down the road, and I would say like death is coming to visit me. He's like, what were your regrets? And I go through my regrets or the potential regrets even in the future. And I would beg him for more time. And he said, what would you do with what would you do for that more time? For more time. And I would tell him what I would do for more time, what I would do with that life. And then he tells me, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to get there? What would you give me right now? Would you be willing to give me millions of dollars? So, hell yeah, I would be willing to give you millions of dollars. Cool. Pay that to me in the form of sacrifice. I do not care about your 9 to 5. Your kids do not care about your 9 to 5. Everyone's telling you to provide, provide, provide. Instead, how about you be present and provide presentness? Like, I don't know what word. Provide being present, provide attention, provide meaning. Time is your most valuable resource, right? It's the most non renewable resource. You don't get it back. And so by time traveling, by putting myself on my deathbed every single day, death is telling me, I'm going to give your life back, but I need you to sacrifice to me those things that you don't think are important, but you think are important now. Does that make sense? Like the things that you realize aren't important on your deathbed, but you think are important now, sacrifice those to me and I will
Mm.
give you more time. And I like jump back to where I am. And then I'm like, yeah, I quit my job. I started a business so I can be around my kids all the time. I took such a significant pay decrease, but I realized like I'm going to eat every day. I don't need to live in the highest. and the nicest house. I want to do something I love every day. I want to make a difference. I want to look my kids every single day and know that that day was fulfilled.
Right.
And
That's incredible.
yeah, and so anyway, I think that it's very important to put you responsible for triaging or categorizing how your life should be every single day. I
Right.
think people run away from death and therefore run away from anxiety, and you got to dive in there. And that's what stoicism has brought for me, is being very, and it's nihilistic in the sense where you optimistic nihilism is described the way I was introduced. It's like you're riding a bike towards a cliff. And nihilism is knowing that you're going to run off that cliff. And you start wondering, like, why is this all happening? Optimistic nihilism is knowing you're going to fall off the cliff. So every moment becomes more precious,
Hmm.
right? And so stoicism kind of, I think, has that element of it. Like stoicism is essentialism, where obviously nihilism is like existentialism. So there's contrast there, but regardless, the message would come out to be the same, is that it's inevitable. We all pray to different gods, and we all argue about what gods are the ones who are speaking to us or not speaking to us. However, at the end of the day, regardless of who is right, we all bow our knee to death.
Right.
And that should unify us. And I don't know why we're all scared of death. I think that people will become very in terms with death, and why we are so attracted to the soldier figure and the sacrificial lamb in terms of movies, you know what I mean? And books, stories. It's because that's who we need to be. That's who we know we need to be subconsciously. It's inevitable, and we need to stop running away from it. So that's what Stoicism has done for me. It's allowed me to make drastic decisions that no one else would possibly make, not preparing for the future. And I do prepare for the future, but for living, I'm betting on today.
Right.
And tomorrow I will have all the tools in my belt to deal with the problems I have today. I will eat. I will find enough money to eat. I will scrape. I'll do whatever I need to make sure my family eats. But most importantly, I will not go a day without appreciating them or spending unnecessary time without them.
That's
So
amazing.
that's why homesteading is very attractive to me as well.
Right. Well, I was just going to say at that cliff, we're all going to go off that cliff, like you said, and it's going to happen so much sooner than most people realize. And like stoicism, I love it because it makes you be present in the moment. That's all we have right now is the moment right now. It also seems to breed like this gratitude. You end up with more gratitude when you think about things that way. But the other thing that's interesting is combining stoicism with eating a proper human diet. We no longer have that brain fog we had before that also seemed to perpetuate the endless anxiety. Like I love that quote. We worry more in imagination than we do in reality. And I feel like most of humanity, myself included, is worrying way, 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 way more than they need to as part of that standard American diet that's kind of perpetuating that. You're in that brain fog and you got that anxiety more so that way. So getting out of that fog is incredible. And then combining it with stoicism, it's so interesting that you did it too, because early on, I've been carnivore like 530 days, but I started seeing things pop up in social media like Ryan
Hmm.
Holiday, different stoics and
Yeah,
stuff like that. And it really helped me out a lot, focusing and knowing that I am in complete control of everything. And no matter what happens, it doesn't matter what happens, I can choose to decide how I'm going to react to that and
exactly.
how I'm going to feel about it. It's such a powerful thing.
Yeah,
Um,
we get in the ice bath a lot here, and for the people who, like, they can't handle it or whatever, I tell them the temperature is the same for every single one of us. You know what I mean? The
right.
difference is what's on the inside. Who's talking to you right now on the inside that allows you to stay in there longer or not stay in there. The the diet is the same for all of us. We all desperately wish that sugar was okay for us. We all desperately wish we could eat that fruit or that cinnamon bun or whatever it may be for you. For me, God, it's for whatever reason I keep thinking about waffles and syrup back when I first started. And which is weird because I like hadn't even had waffles in years, but we all wish. We all know, you know what I mean? And people are like, oh, I could never give that up. I was like, yes, you can. Don't you think you think I have some special thing where it's like, oh, I just don't like good food. Get
Right.
the hell out of here. Like, and and what you said, combining stoicism with diet, I think it's essential that we have something that guides us, mind, body, and soul. Like you said, if the vehicle, the mechanism, the organism that is holding these thoughts is poison, how well can you do? You know what I mean?
Right.
How much of a disadvantage, which is why I believe like David Goggins and all these people, they're so like powerful because their discipline has to come over not only the fact that of course they are disciplined, but the fact that they're overcoming a system that is so deplete. So they have to overcome it with discipline. And so like I remember watching your channel out of nowhere, you went from being like catatonic to like, I'm feeling pretty good. I need to move. Then you start doing pull-ups and you start working out because you have so much energy. That doesn't take discipline. You need so much discipline in your life because you're already so broken. So I'm now imagine having discipline on top of the fact, which by the way, I think discipline is like the most important thing, but now you have discipline on top of the fact that you have the energy to do it.
Right.
And you're not being corrupt by the poison, the inflammation, and the lack of mitochondrial efficacy. You're not being tarnished by that. You're not being held back by that. So I think you can only become as physically fit as you can be mentally fit, as you can be spiritually fit. They all connect and you cannot get away. It you just simply cannot get away. And so for me, simulating combat for soldiers is one of the most important things because like we said, we can't run away from it. We can no longer run away from it. You have to go into the fear, and your fear is the combat, right? So, jujitsu is this incredible opportunity to simulate combat on a very personal level in a safe environment with the same similar camaraderie and hierarchy and trust that, the what's it called? Like the combined trauma, like the unity trauma. You know what I mean? I'll think of the word here in a second. But you, you have this opportunity of people that you end up trusting. You bleed together. You try to hurt each other to make each other better. Iron sharpens iron. And shared trauma. That you have this like weird shared trauma that you're going through, and you're building up together because you've all sucked at jujitsu, and you're all getting better at a slow rate. It's all delayed gratification. You all started at a place of humility, which is like the military, and you're giving that them back. And so when you get there and you start having a PTSD moment, like a flare up, as my friend calls it, I laugh because it's just sorry, don't I? Of course, I'm a veteran, so but they'll know what I'm talking about. But you have like this moment where you feel like you can't control yourself. Doesn't matter. You're not getting out from underneath this guy. He knows how to hold you there. So your brain has to figure out. It has to get from that hippocampus, that hypothalamus, there's fight or flight, to that prefrontal cortex to make sure you're okay. And you never gave your brain the opportunity to do that because you've never gone back into combat. It's
Mm.
always continuously so the amygdala becomes swollen when you're in stressful situations, especially people who experience uh, chronic or prolonged stress, like being in combat. And so the amygdala sends a signal to the hypothalamus to release fight or flight chemicals. It's like the animal part of your brain. And then it goes to the hippocampus to say, remember this so you don't forget this trauma so you can learn from next time to avoid the threat of dying again. What happens over there is your amygdala becomes swollen. So it's called amygdala hijacking. So things that don't even make sense are sending fight or flight signals. And think about it, you start getting shot at, then there's like 20 minutes where you have to pump adrenaline to keep yourself alive. You know what I mean? And then it tells the hippocampus, remember that one weird thing caused that. And so that's why panic attacks start happening because weird things start triggering it and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That your amygdala becomes swollen, sending more random things. Your hippocampus starts degrading. And the diet that you're on in the military and a diet that we're all on and being ultra processed foods and not allowing ketones to get to the brain to cross blood brain barrier as we become insulin resistant, the hippocampus shrinks. All the evidence is about this. And that causes mental illness. And it also, this diet doesn't allow you to increase BDNF, which repairs your hippocampus size and the gray matter in the brain. So it's like it starts going downhill. And so what? not only do we need the process of being on a proper human diet to assist that, to allow increase in BDNF, to do fasting, feasting, things of that nature, but the hard work increases BDNF. But on top of that, you now need to put yourself back in danger to allow the hippocampus to transfer that memory to the frontal cortex where it doesn't engage in fight or flight. And so, with steak strangles and stoicism, with carnivore diet, proper human diet, with putting yourself back in those scenarios, and with stoicism, putting yourself back in control of what's happening to you, where you're not a victim in a response, I truly believe that we have the most effective way of intervening with people who are dealing with mental health issues and PTSD, chronic illness, overweight issues, so on and so forth. And they all link together. And I know we went a little bit over time. Thank you so much for giving me your patience and the time to do this. But that's my message. Make veterans great again with steak strangles and stoicism. Let's heal the world. You know what I mean, with carnivore. Let's reverse this narrative that we have going on about men. And obviously, you see, I'm very passionate about it. That's
Yeah,
who I am. And if I could connect with those other guys who are doing this for veterans, I
you're
think we could
doing,
really.
uh, giving people hope. It's it's amazing. I wish we had more time. It's crazy. I can't believe it's already been over an hour now. But
Yeah,
I'd love to have you back, Chad. Maybe sometime we do like a veterans live stream or something. Maybe I could get Arn or Carnivore Soldier Larry on something like that. But you got an open invite if you want to do another one of these. In the meantime, can you tell people how can they find you, learn more about what you're doing?
absolutely. And I'm going to start releasing a ton of videos here soon. They're on the backlog. But if you go to the link tree that I'm going to give you, Combat Carnivore link tree, my Instagram is Combat Carnivore, and the link will be on there as well. But I have my Instagram and my YouTube, and I'm building this online community. However, based on combining with you and your team, we'll see how that goes. Because I would rather than having a bunch of different platforms and opportunities, I'd rather like hone in on one message and one front, you know what I mean? So we'll see how that goes. But as of right now, I have this online community where we meet a couple days a week and live calls. And there's my entire introductory to jujitsu. I think so many people want to do jujitsu, but they're scared. They have some sort of barrier, whether it be anxiety or whatever, and not knowing about jujitsu. So I create this intro course for them in that community. There's a place to talk and ask questions, and there's a place for stoic discourse on there as well. So that all the stakes, wrangles, and stoicism. So I try to make myself to as many people as possible. It's not very expensive. It's just a monthly fee in order for us to get this message out to as many people as possible. In that link tree that I'll give you, there's a Make Veterans Great Again merchandise, which is just shirts, hats, and rash guards for people who do jujitsu. Um, and I'm going to use all the proceeds from that to help get the message out that to veterans. So uh, I don't use "Make Veterans Great Again" as a political statement for a certain candidate. I do it to turn heads. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so if you're like, oh, this guy's already making some sort of judgment or stigma about my political belief, I probably won't state my political beliefs on here ever. Just know that that's not a political statement. It's just catching with the trend of everything going on. But regardless if you're Republican or Democrat, I think most of us agree that whether you agree with war or not, that our veterans are suffering, and they suffered either for a good cause or needlessly. Regardless, they're suffering, and we need to help them. And right now, we have the means to help them with free information. So it's all about just getting that message out. So that's how you can find me. So know that the channel is growing. If you go to it right now, I had to get rid of my jujitsu channel because I revamped everything, and I'll be growing this. I'll be committing so much of my life to getting this information out there. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chad. I really appreciate it. I will have that link to his link tree as well in the description below. And like I said, Chad, you got an open invite. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Have a good day.
You too.